Hey, it's Joe Solari here with the Business of Writing, and today I have Alessandra Torre and JD Lassica to talk about a new product that they're bringing to the market. How you guys doing?
Hey there. We're
Great.
good. Thanks for having me on.
So we've kind of got the United States triangulated here, right? You're in California, JD, and we've got the furthest tip of the United States.
I'm South Florida. JD's in
Greater Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and I'm in Chicago. So I guess maybe we should have somebody from Maine.
Yeah,
great.
Canadian.
So I was excited to have you guys on because I saw this product early stages. I think it was NINC last year. So we're coming on a year ago, and saw what you guys were up to with this use of artificial intelligence to help authors make better products. And then maybe it was Facebook, you made the announcement that you're kind of doing your rollout here. So I was like, wow, if we're ready, I think we should really get folks to understand some of the new tools that are available. So with that kind of opener, maybe you guys could say a little bit about yourself and then talk about this new cool product that you guys have.
Absolutely. I'll jump in. I'm Alessandra. I am a author by nature. I mean, that's my primary business. I write romance and suspense novels, and I started self-publishing in 2012. I'm traditionally and self-published, but I've been working with the Authors A.I team for probably 6 months, and am one of the co-founders. And our focus is on helping authors to write better books. So helping authors with their novels and the editorial process of those novels and using artificial intelligence to do so. So that's kind of the root of our business. JD is the co-founder. JD, I'll let you introduce yourself and say how this all came about.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Experience Officer of Authors A.I, and that means I sort of help make sure that when authors come to the site, they know what to do. They're happy with the service. We kind of think of ourselves as not really selling a product as much as a service. So we're here to help authors as part of the author community. So this is a startup for and by and of authors, as Abraham Lincoln would have said. So, we've also got a couple of data scientists on the team because, we just have to do that for the AI piece. But other than that, it's completely run by authors.
Great.
Yeah, and there's JD and I, but there's a really big team behind us, and it's mostly indie authors, a lot of hybrid authors, but we have over 120 best-selling authors that have helped us develop the product, test the product, and that are continually aiding us with tweaking and finding new things that Marlo, our technology is called Marlo, that Marlo can find and help us with in our manuscripts.
So why don't you kind of get into like Marlo and what it does and how you're seeing it impact the marketplace?
Sure. Marlo is pretty simple concept. You visit the website and you upload your manuscript, and then she reads it, and she can read a manuscript in probably about a minute and a half, depending on the length of the manuscript. And then she delivers her findings in this, what I think is a beautiful, 25, 30 page report. And so that report kind of goes into all of the different things that she found. So her technology is built and based on bestsellers. So she has read enormous number of New York Times and not just New York Times, but best-selling novels, and learned what is similar in them. But excuse me. So in the plot and the characterization and the pacing and different things. So basically she's like this huge database of bestsellerdom and what makes that. Okay. So then she compares your book against those ideal traits. Okay. And then the areas that you're doing great in and the areas that you might need work in. So so what she will show you, and it's really cool, the report, like she'll chart out your plot with the highs and lows of it, the same with your pacing. there's a few things like, commonly used adverbs and adjectives and your narrative beats. There's a huge list of things that she does, but she delivers this to you, and then you can choose what you want to do with that, whether you want to take that advice. We call her she's very friendly, she's non-biased, and she doesn't get her feelings hurt if you ignore her advice. So unlike some editors I've dealt with, but yeah, so she delivers her findings, and then you can use those to go through your next rewrite. And a lot of authors use her in this report at multiple stages in their process, in their editorial process. A lot of people use it just kind of right before publishing. I like to use it before it ever hits a developmental editor, so I can hopefully fix as much stuff as I can before I am paying a human to do it.
So, and just so I understand this, when you're like this database, I got two questions about this that you can answer to. One is like, how many books are in that pool? And then how is that pool changing over time to make sure that this is kind of a rich environment because it's based on machine learning. The more that goes into it, the better it gets, is my assumption.
I don't know the size of her initial pool of bestsellers, and it's one that has been added to consistently over the years. JD, do you know a number off the top of your head?
No, but we're actually this week going out and buying a whole ton of new books in various genres. So the way to think about this is sort of like, this is version 1.0, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So they're almost like generic kind of findings that are the part of the characteristics of bestseller books across various genres. That's pretty cool, because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of the most novels have in common in terms of pacing or plot structure, that sort of thing. But there's so many different variations, as people who write in different genres know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the holy grail is really to go out there and actually create specialized reports genre by genre. So, hopefully in 6 to 9 months, we're going to have a thriller report and a fantasy report and a science fiction report, and they're going to have some things in common, which are all part of Marlo 1.0, but they're going to have a lot of differences too, in terms of what do you need to do in the romance novel at this point in your book? What are the tropes of reader expectations? So, Matt tells us, he only needs like a few hundred extra books from where we are today to actually be able to get to that stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Matt. Maybe you want to talk about kind of the brains behind the brains and how this kind of developed.
Yeah, go ahead, Alison.
Matt Jockers, a lot of people are familiar, but if you're not familiar with a book that came out a few years ago, it's called The Bestseller Code. It's a fascinating read. It's well worth reading. But basically, it's the science behind our science. It's where Marlo's initial, idea was formed, and it's the same thing. It breaks down an AI that read, hundreds of bestsellers, and that book really walks through the commonalities that it found. So what you should shoot for in terms of pacing, or what you should shoot for in terms of subject matter. So Matt is our chief scientist. He's also one of the co-founders. So we have him, and he's amazing. And he is, there's no one in the field of AI and data mining in fiction better than Matt. And it's really incredible what he can do and what we can bring to him. Like, the other day we're like, oh, I guess it's been a couple months. Oh, we'd love to have a cliche finder. Like, could she point out all the times that we're using cliches, in our writing? And, a week later we had a cliche finder, and that was, pointing out every cliche that you've used and how many times you've used it. So, so it's really neat, and he's great. He's not alone on the team. There are other data scientists that are helping him. But in your initial question, you said how many books has Marlo read? Marlo's read hundreds of books, but how is she evolving? I mean, we're working through partnerships, and every author that submits their book to Marlo has the option of whether they want that book to be included. Whether they want Marlo to learn from their book, they can, but we're also working on purchasing, but also acquiring through partnerships a huge database. So Marlo is getting very, very smart. Not that she already isn't, but she's growing really smart really quickly.
Sure. You're going to say something?
I kind of think, Joe, that interviews like this are really helpful to help demystify this whole concept of artificial intelligence in the fiction field, right? Because when you take an author and you sort of tell them, oh, we're going to use AI to help you with your books, it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Because there's a certain kind of hesitation initially that hesitation in the sense a lot of people are thinking like, this is a creative art form. So what the hell does an AI know about my writing, right? So what we're trying to do is sort of explain that, it's not like we're downloading this, strange intelligence from the internet and just putting in your computer and it's just going to go wild. It's actually a set of algorithms that are done through a technique called machine learning that Matt has been able to utilize to actually create a system that detects patterns across different kinds of books, right? So I think anybody who's an author who's been doing this for a while understands that there are certain things that you do or you don't do in your novels. And I wish I had an AI like Marlo when I was starting out my career in fiction a few years ago, because it would have saved a lot of pain. And maybe I would have still read those 20 books to get me where I am today. But there are certain things that we learn as authors that are little tricks of the trade that you have to do at certain points in your novel to help keep your reader engaged, to get them to turn the pages. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to unlock in this algorithm where, Matt, when he actually brought this over to us, he gave us like these really interesting graphics. Here's what the AI says about your novels, right? And we said, this is really interesting and cool, but what the hell does it mean? And so we wanted to make sure that everything that is in the reports that are issued to every author has a little section called how to use this data, or what this data means, right? So you have to actually go in and sort of understand not just what's happening in your novel, but it gives you like best practices or tips of what best-selling novels do, and so you can compare your novel against those.
Well, I know with the clients that I work with, one of the things that we talk about is, a lot of these folks are doing very well, and it took them time to get there, right? They were 10, 20-year overnight successes. So what can we learn today in books that are successful versus their unsuccessful books? Right. So when you found your voice, what changed? What can we do to make those particular things? Formulaic isn't necessarily the right word, but make sure that we do the things that people find satisfying. To be able to expand that out is really interesting to me, right? It's fine that we can look at what works for JD, but what about all authors in his genre? And it's not only making him the same as what's successful, but maybe understanding what it makes you unique.
Well, and that's, I think, when really the power of genre specific reports come in. And that's like our version 2.0, which is coming soon. Because I, for one, am going to be fascinated to know like that thrillers on average have shorter sentences, and their pacing graph looks like this versus my romance pacing graph, and how, because there are a lot of authors that do switch genres. I write romance and I write suspense, and we need to train our brains to write in two very different styles depending on what genre we write in. And to that effect of what you've said in the beginning, I ran my least successful book through Marlo, and then I ran my most successful book through Marlo so that I could compare the two. And there were marked differences between the two. And that's another thing that we really want, that is in the pipeline, and that will be coming in the next 6 to 9 months, is being able to compare books side by side, both or it could be draft 1 and draft 2 of your novel. It could be your worst book and your best book, or it could be your book and the firm, you know, or a really successful book that's in your genre so that you can see apples to apples, or, you know, I guess not apples to apples, but yeah, apples to oranges, how your book does compared to that other book. Whether that other book is the next draft of that book.
Yeah. To that point, just could you share a little bit about what was enlightening to you about that good and bad comparison?
Yeah, absolutely. So my least successful book and my most successful book, one issue that I had was in the pacing. And this was something that I knew already from reviews, but if I had run this dang report before I published it, I could have fixed it before. That Marlo looks at is like the narrative beats, or where the beats are in your book. Can you hear me? Because it says my connection is unstable.
It dropped out a little bit, but you're okay.
Okay. I'm good now. Okay. So it has the beats where action is occurring and where you have, you know, kind of pivotal moments. And those beats ideally should be 10% apart. But for my worst book, the first half was very slow, and I could see it in several places. I could see it in that beats section of the report. I could also see it in the pacing section of the report. And pacing for Marlo is not how much action is going on necessarily. It's how quickly and invested the readers are in what they're reading and how quickly they're turning the pages. Okay, so it's the pace at which that reader is really reading through and hopefully devouring your book. So for my least successful book, the pacing and the beats, like that first half was too slow. And I needed to be more consistent across the board in the book and what I did. And then just like my early books, I used way too many adjectives and adverbs. I used similar language a lot. I had some crutch phrases that I used consistently, which is not a good thing, but just, you know, things. I used a lot of, you know, by the way, my character was continually shrugging her shoulders, just going at every opportunity, you know, so just things like that as a newbie author, just didn't even register and didn't register in my read-throughs. And at that point in time, I didn't really have a budget for a great editor. But now that I'm, you know, in my groove and I know more, I know what to watch out for, and I have a much stronger editorial team that catches those things.
Maybe this would be a good time to kind of show the report and kind of, you could talk through some of those things that you just mentioned, like the pacing and some of these other concepts that you're trying to hit.
Sure. And for those authors out there who are still kind of hesitant about not wanting to write in a formulaic way, right? We kind of think of it not in terms of formula, but in terms of like a certain playbook with certain rules of the road. So the kinds of things that a lot of beginning authors or aspiring authors certainly don't know about, like your beginning hook, the inciting event that propels your protagonist into the middle build, like you need a midpoint shift that's turns your story in a new direction. You need lots of reversals and plot twists and revelations. You know, that climactic build up towards the end with an ending payoff. So all these kinds of things are sort of pointed at in the report. And like Alexander said, Marlo doesn't tell you you got to do this, but it sort of points out, well, you know, think about this at least, right? Here's what other authors are doing, right? So if it makes sense, I can share my screen and show you like an example of a report, just so we get a little more, you know, the rules of writing are show, don't tell, right? So let me show a little bit here. I'll take you. So if you come to our site, which is just authors.ai, like one of the simplest URLs in the world, you know, you'll see the front page, and then you'll be able to start navigating your way through here. If you go to like any of the plan pages, we hope people like sign up for memberships, right? So very, very inexpensive. But you go to a membership page like the pro author page, right? So if you scroll down, you'll see sample reports. So we've run all of these reports. Ernest couldn't do it himself, so we did it for him. So I wonder what he would have thought of this, but probably not much. But you know, if he got used to it, he might like the idea. So if you click on any of these,
if it allowed him to pay for more hunting trips, he probably would have done it.
there you go. Yeah. So I'll enter full screen here. So you can actually see the full report for all of these well-known authors here. And as you go through it, you'll sort of understand what are the different sections. So there's a plot structure that shows like the narrative arc and the plot turns within your novel, and it'll explain, you know, how to use this data, right? Like Alexander was saying, like every 10%, every 12% of the book, it's good to have like a story beat, something really significant happening that really piques the interest of the reader. So that actually identifies where it is. And by the way, it actually shows you exactly where that happens within your book. So it'll give you a citation of the exact phrase, so you can do a search on it at the 20% mark. That's where you'll find it. Pacing, it's not good to have like a flat graph. You want to have lots of ups and downs and give your reader some breathing room, right? You want to have some differentiation between the different characters. This is one of the pieces of the report we're still working on quite a bit, firming this up. Dialogue versus narrative. When Matt came to us, a lot of these sections didn't even exist, right, Alessandra?
Yeah.
Where did this come from, the dialogue piece?
I think a lot of people were this was a common request we got from early beta testers. They were just like, once we hear something 2 or 3 times, we're like, let's really look at, can we do that? And so, yeah, it was like, oh, I'd love to know if I'm using too much dialogue, if I'm not using enough. And what's really cool about this graph is, first, it just tells you just book-wide, like what your percentage of dialogue was. But also, and one thing I really like is this graph, because you can see, like with this book, The Girl on the Train, was really dialogue heavy kind of at the beginning. And then it started, I'm sorry, I'm using the opposite. It was really dialogue light in the beginning, and then you can see sections of the book where it was much heavier on dialogue. So that can kind of tell you also, if you're getting feedback from beta users or from your editors that this section of the book is slow, a lot of times the first thing I do is go and I look at my dialogue counts, and oh, is that part of the book really heavy in dialogue? And here you can see it in an instance, versus trying to scroll through hundreds of pages in my Word doc to figure something out. And I can say, oh, maybe I should add more. Maybe I should cut back on dialogue.
Yeah. And if you want to use this barcode, it's Safeway and to check out a loaf of bread, maybe that'll work too. Major subjects in your novel. Again, we're working on this more to become a little bit more accurate, but it gives you like a good high-level view of what are the subjects that you're tackling and what the best recommended practices are. Then this stuff, and this is kind of fun, the explicit, I hope it doesn't show you too many, I should have blocked out these words before it goes into
I can't think of it too, Lord.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some naughty language here, let's just say, okay?
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder of, oh yeah, I used that word this many times, do I really want to do that? So I don't know of anybody else, other reports that do that. And by the way,
go back to the question finder on the right. So she did pretty well. I mean, and a lot of times you can look at it and be like, oh, okay, I'm not too bad. But it's interesting, she had hands-on 19 times. Granted, that could have been like, I put my hands on it. Still seems like a lot of times I'm hands-on in a book. So I'd probably do a search and look at each of those and see if I could change some of them.
Yeah, this is usually a lot longer for most novels. And then it's up to you, it's not like we're saying don't use cliches, but it's like you want to use them strategically, right? Repetitive phrases, we just added this a few days ago. Some authors said, they think it's a good idea to sort of understand, are they using certain, like Alessandra said, clutch phrases, or do you have like certain authorial tics that you go back to? I think almost every author has these, right? So it's a good reality check of how often you use these kinds of terms. Sentence structure gives you a readability score, tells you what reading grade level you're hitting. A lot of my early writing was a little bit too high, high school and above, when you really want to try to get, if you're going for a mass market with popular fiction, you know, you want to get that number down. It'll tell you like a complexity score and what the ideal complexity score is.
Let's go back for a minute before you. This is one of my favorite things that I've started looking at in the report. It gives the longest sentence that was in your manuscript, and that's just really interesting to me because sometimes I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? You know, I have like 4 or 5 sentences washed into here. And what the most complex is, her most complex is 7.43. The one I looked at yesterday was 11.8 whatever complexity, so it was insane. All right, go ahead. Sorry, I get excited about my favorite parts, so I have to.
Yeah, and again, it gives you like a yardstick to measure against, because you have no idea what does this mean, right? So it'll explain it comparing to other bestsellers. And then the last half of the report is similar in some ways to the other kind of tools that are out there in the marketplace, pro writing aid, Grammarly, right? So it'll show you like how often you're using certain kind of words. And again, you want to use these words, but you want to be strategic in how often you use them. Verb choice, passive voice, even punctuation data. Are you using too many exclamation points? Interestingly enough, it tells you that bestsellers use a lot more questions than non-bestsellers. So it'll give you some suggestions about that. Are your lead characters sort of inquisitive enough? Are they asking right questions, you know, to sort of generate interest and intrigue at certain points? And then usually this page is like full of misspelling. And most
would be if I ran a book.
Right. And for your first draft, it ain't going to be clean, right? So, you know, and I'm a former editor, and I've got tons of typos that slip into my work, even when I send them out to beta readers, and I say, how the hell did I do this? Or how did this get in there? So this is really a nice way to sort of clean up your manuscript before you send it out to an editor or to a beta reader. So that's it. This one's what, 26 pages long. So yeah, can you just imagine that though? Like you send in your manuscript over the internet, 15 minutes later, it generates a 25-page full color report for less than $30. So that's the value proposition here.
Yeah, she's the quickest editor you'll ever have.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about that? Like, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, how you like to kind of mix this in with the editing process, but thinking about it maybe from the perspective of maybe an early stage author that doesn't have as much of a budget versus somebody that's kind of probably already got a process that they're happy with, and now this is something that they would layer into that.
Sure. So Marlo is great for a lot of different types of authors. So one type is that is a new author or an aspiring author. And I think we've all had that moment where we finished our first book and then you're mixed with this like equal excitement and dread. Like, is this book, you're like, yay, I finished a book. Is it good? Like, I have no idea. And normally for a lot of those, the only people that they have who can really give it to is their mother or a family member or, you know, best friend. And that feedback can be wildly inaccurate on both sides. You can have somebody who gives you, you know, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing I've ever read in my life. And, you know, and doesn't have the heart to point out any of its flaws or see any of its flaws. And then you also have someone who does not read your genre and they're, you know, and they're picking apart the smallest things and it's just so frustrating. So Marlo's really great for anyone who's new or who isn't sure and who wants just some honest and fast, you know, non-biased feedback. So she's great for that. She's great for an author who's on a budget and who maybe, because a lot of new authors can't afford a developmental editor, or they might only be able to afford for an editor to look at their manuscript one time. So a lot of what we would suggest is to use Marlo because she is very inexpensive. Use Marlo during your own self-editing, as so you can get that manuscript as clean as possible before you're actually paying someone to go through and read So she's great for that. What we're also seeing in our founding authors are, 125 best-selling authors that are on the team. They use her, it depends on the author, but the authors that use her very frequently. A lot of them use her with every draft to see how their drafts change from draft to draft. A lot of them use her just at the end or just at the beginning, or they use her post-release to try to compare why a book might be doing well versus not doing well. But if I was going to write a perfect game plan for when you were going to use Marlo, and if you're on a tight budget, I would use her early on as much as you can. And if you don't have money to hire an editor at all, then use her in conjunction with beta readers, strong beta readers, and she can really help clean up your manuscript a lot and help with self-editing. If you're an author who has a team or has multiple editors, I would use her throughout the process, because it makes you look at your manuscript in a completely different way. It's really cool. It just gives you a different perspective of looking at your writing that you just can't see on your own. I mean, it's just possible. We're not computers. We don't say that she replaces a human editor, though. Our goal is not to put human editors out of business at all, but if someone can't afford a human editor, then she's a great option for them.
Right, we've got editors on the team. Yeah, I think it's important to understand the distinguish the differences that we sort of have in our own minds about who we're appealing to here. So yes, there's the beginning author, the aspiring author. People are just starting out, a little bit unsure of how their novels ought to be structured. But then there's also the more established author, the veteran author, who are also finding value in Marlo in other ways. So what a lot of our authors are telling us is that they use it, like Alessandra said, to go through different drafts. And what they're doing is actually, I think a lot of them are using the plot structure section and sort of understanding, I sort of was thinking that this was actually happening at the midway point when it's actually at the 60% mark. And so I have to go back and rearrange some of my chapters. Or I have to insert a new scene here. Or I've got too much of a lapse between interesting things happening. So there's too much of a lull where you give readers too much of a pause between different action scenes. And so they go back and add another kind of action scene during that kind of pacing valley to get a little bit of a spike there, right? So it's more, so for those people who know what they're doing already, we're not introducing new concepts. We're just giving you a snapshot of what this current draft looks like so you can go back and fine tune it to make it, to get it to the point where you would eventually get it anyway in a few months of rewrites. And this will just give you a really easy way to, this is what I need to do this weekend to fix it up.
Sure. I mean, that makes so much sense that, authors that are doing well already, they may have an innate feeling for where this stuff is, but to be able to really fine tune it, and to have a way where it doesn't tax them as much to try and figure it out. Like Alessandra was saying, you could figure it out if you read through it multiple times, or you get your little, DNA bar you had there and see it visually and then go drive in point by point and fix things faster. For authors that are on a faster pace writing schedule, this will really help up the product quality. And I think that, on this channel, we always get into craft and product improvement, because if you don't have a good product, you're not going to sell books. It's that simple. Like, the beauty of today's marketplace is if you have a book that you have to write, you can get that book out in the market. Now, if you want to add the caveat to it, you want it to sell and make you money. Well, now things have to change, right? Somebody has to be prepared to give you time and money for that. And now they get a say, and you're giving away for the market feedback in a whole new way to say, like, this is the books that people are buying, right? This is what's, we were watching a show last night, and I was amazing how well they did getting the tension in the room, right? I could feel it. I could feel it in my wife. when you can do that, when you were able to make that, it sounds kind of like a dirty word, formulaic, that helps your product sell more. Like, and that's what people want, right? That's like, I want to see that. I'm sad that show's over. Like, I can't watch it and get that same feeling again, right? Because I know the tension part's coming up. So I think that this tool is going to be really interesting to see how people play, use it when they're plotting out their books.
Yeah, and that was one thing early. And I say early. I mean, I hear it all the time now. I think a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute. If I use a computer, if I'm matching these, whatever, aren't we basically going to be creating a bunch of books that are all the same? And you kind of realize as soon as you read through your first report that that's not. Marlo isn't suggesting to you like, oh, the hero should. I mean, she is giving you the information about your book and where it is different, but she's not giving you, she's not sitting down, she's not magic, right? She's not sitting down and telling you, what different plot path you should take. She's just saying, here, we need more excitement or more interest or more attention. And then it's up to you, the author, to take it or leave it, but also to come up with a solution for that. So the only thing that is formulaic, and it's not even, is just the same great rules of craft that we're experiencing in other things. It's just this technology is able to point out some that we wouldn't think of, like having more questions in a bestseller. Like, how on earth would anyone have ever known that before we had the technology to read hundreds of bestsellers and pick out that unique attribute.
Yeah, and Joe, you mentioned craft, right? So I just want to throw one thing out there, and that is that for a tech startup or any startup really, you have to find like a hole in the marketplace, right? And I don't really know of another site out there that is really all about craft. Right, so there's like a zillion book marketing sites and services.
Yeah, there's no shortage of that.
Everybody tells you how to write, how to sell your crappy book, but nobody tells you how to write a great book. So that's what we saw out there. So we're all about trying to sort of help people get to write that next great American novel or the best novel in your genre out there. And so we're doing it in two ways. One is through Marlo. We've been talking all along about the AI, but also we're trying to create like a sort of small author community that's going to be growing over time and burgeoning, but it's all around the idea of craft. What are the best practices? Can I talk to other authors in my genre who have confronted the same kinds of issues? So there's some sites out there like 20 Books, we're big fans of they've got Craig's got like 40,000 people over 20 Books to 50K now, Craig and Michael. And then Mark Dawson has a great community too. But we want to just stay focused, not on the marketing, but on the craft of improving your novel, of helping you through the AI, but also you're going to have some specific questions. So we want to have like authors and editors on hand to actually help guide you through your own particular kind of questions and struggles. So that's what we're sort of building at this point, like an author resources section of the site, a knowledge base. So that's going to get more and more robust over time.
Sure, and I've done a fair bit of research to understand where machine learning is going to play its part, and I think that the other thing to get clear with folks is this isn't a tool to write a book. Right. It's a tool to help you consume information. And what I mean by that is that human beings only have so much capacity to hold information in their head. And your bias is, well, if I don't know it, then it mustn't be important. Right. But now let me ask you a different question. If you have a situation where you're going to go to see a radiologist because you might think that you have a tumor, do you want one guy who sort of's got some good training, or do you want a machine that's looked at every single slide of any kind of tumor and has brought some kind of information to point that guy at what he should and should not think is the right thing. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's having something as a tool to make the guy who's going to cut that tumor out better at finding and cutting out the right tumor. Right. I know it's a horrific example, but I think it brings home the whole idea of like, if it's something if the stakes are as high as your life, then do you just want to trust one person, or do you want to trust something that can look at every single piece of data there ever was and find what's relevant to your specific case?
And there are a lot of ways you can use AI, you know, for evil or for good, right?
Yeah.
Joanna Penn's always talking about this. She's like, she's probably one of the big thought leaders in the space. Her podcast addresses AI all the time. So I think a lot of her readers are always worried about AI in the sense that, you know, is the AI going to take my novel and, you know, write like a duplicate kind of book? What's the name of that kind of technique, Alessandra, that you came across?
Text spin. Are you familiar with text spinning at all, Joe?
What's it called?
Text spinning.
No, I haven't heard this one.
It's when like a computer reads a sentence, like I stormed into the room and looked around for my novel, right? Mm-hmm. And then so you put that sentence in, and then it spins it into a different sentence that says the same thing but uses different words. So frantic to find my novel, I rushed into the room and, you know, and searched or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's something plagiarists are using to, you know, they upload an entire book, it text spins, and it, you know, produces a new book, which mm-hmm. has all different words, but the same story. And so there's this debate, like, is this plagiarism? Like, yes, we think it's plagiarism, but it is, you know, like it's just hard. Like it's, yeah, our goal is AI for good, you know, not for evil. And, because it can be, like, technology can be dangerous in our industry.
We know the AI wave is coming across all sectors, right, Joe? You probably
sure. Yeah.
We wanted to get out in front of that wave, right? So it doesn't wash over us. So we actually have some control and say over its direction. So yeah, we don't want anybody out there to create an AI that like takes a Dan Brown novel and a Stephen King novel and mashes them together and produces a new novel based on their style and tone and their track record, because that technology is coming very soon if it's not here already. So we're going to put a stake in the ground and saying that we're only going to be supporting any kind of AI that lets authors use this technology to help them improve their own work, not to write a new work, you know, completely from the start.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's always going to be folks that are going to use these tools to do that kind of stuff. And just like a lot of the trends that we've seen in the industry, there's a short-lived period where those guys can exploit the marketplace and maybe make some money, but eventually that comes to an end. And if you're looking to build a real brand around your intellectual property, copycat books isn't going to do it unless you're copycatting your own books, right? Like if you're getting what's right about your voice going through other books that you're writing.
Well, unless you create a series of pen names too, right? So then people won't, you know, I think, you know, there are people out there with not quite the same morals that we have. So, you know, these aren't the people we want to have involved in this project in any way. So,
yeah, there's, you know, I think that a lot of that stuff, you know, it gets a lot more concern than it really should get, because there's no lack of opportunity if you can create great intellectual property. I mean, people like to be entertained. There's going to be more people on this planet. They're going to have more leisure time. They're looking to have that time spent reading or watching or listening to great stories. And in that, having a tool like this where you can improve your own game, right? Like, people are going to vote with their money, right? That's how the game works. And if you're upping your game and you're meeting their needs, it's
Yeah.
going to be helpful.
This is how I've been telling you this all the time. This is how I sort of see Marlo, as helping you monetize your imagination, right? It's like helping you sort of understand, I know I've got a great story inside me. I think almost everybody in the world has like a great story to tell. They just don't know how to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like we call it software as a service. In a sense of, but people get confused by that because they think, oh, I have to download something like Microsoft Word or something, right? But it's basically just, you upload something, we give you something back, and then you do what you want with it. There's nothing fancy. You don't have to know technology to use the service. All you have to do is have a manuscript in a Word doc.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's
and
great.
the other thing that Marlo is, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole because this can easily lead to a rabbit hole, but our focus is on helping authors to write great books by improving their books and improving their editing process, but also helping readers find great books. So Marlo is focused not only on that, but in future things and in other developments, she will be helping, if there's a great book that's out there, helping readers find that great book based off other books. So we're using her technology in a lot of really cool ways.
No, that's great. That's great. So you want to kind of help people understand how, I know you already showed it once, but, quickly recap where they can find this, and then you
Like how much she is and stuff.
Yeah. Give people a feel for how they can give this a test run.
Sure. So if you visit Authors.ai, that's the Marlo's website. That's our website. That's what JD was showing earlier on his screen share. And that's where you can view a bunch of sample reports, so you can really get a good idea of what's included in a report and what would be included in your own report if you ran one. And then you can decide. We have plans that are as inexpensive as, I think, less than $18 a month if you do the annual plan. And you get 2 full reports a month, but those reports roll over. You can use them at your leisure throughout the year. And so it can really satisfy someone who publishes multiple books a year, or that really wants to run a lot of reports throughout their editing process. And then we also have, that's our pro plan, and that's a monthly plan. Or someone can just order a single report if they don't want a monthly plan. It is more expensive. The best, route is the pro plan. But then those are the 2 ways to go. And then they just upload their manuscript whenever they're ready, and 15 minutes later in their inbox they have it. So that's the gist of it. Did I miss anything, JD?
No, but Joe, when we were starting out, we had a lot of discussions about what kind of business model should we have as a company, right? As an author-based company, and we decided to go with this membership model instead of just charging for a report. That would have been the easy way to do this. Instead, we put this really kind of intricate WooCommerce backend that we're still grappling with to make it simple for users. But the idea was that we wanted authors to come here and see us not as just a one-off where, here, I'll run my report once, maybe I'll come back in 6 months. We want them to stay involved. So we're trying to create this author community, and that's why we've got this pro author membership model, where you come, you join for as little as $29.95 a month for the membership if you're doing the monthly, and then less than that if it's a yearly. And the idea is to stay engaged with us, to be able to ask us questions, to join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/AuthorsAI. And that's free and public to join. So we have a lot of authors joining every day and finding other authors, having interesting conversations there about craft and about their own work, and asking questions and telling us about their books. So it's kind of a fun kind of coffee clatch in a way, right? Where it's not just about a cold AI report, it's more about how can I actually advance my career through improving my writing and my storytelling.
Well, and I've seen in like communities like that have built around products in the author community, like Reader Links, Logston, and that group that they do.
He's one of our members. Yep.
One of the things that ends up creating a lot more value for you guys is authors using the product, cross-talking, and like, hey, I did this. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about using it that way. And you're like, neither did we. But because then those people get to take that as the advanced guard and get some advantage from it. Some of the stuff that I've learned in those groups or help, with those products has been amazing, and has really changed how people have gone, in that case, really marketing. But I'm sure that's going to be a similar thing, that as you guys develop more tools, people are going to be inspired to use them in ways that you never thought of.
And we're a little bit selfish and self-interested, right, Alessandra? We're always asking people, what else should we put in this report? Or what do you need? Or what have we not thought about? And a lot of people are coming up with some great ideas.
No, that's great.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we have such a big team of authors, because like when they first delivered the Marlo report ages ago, probably 9 or 10 months ago, it was just like the data. And the first thing the authors said was like, this is great. How do we use this? Like, what the heck do we do with all of this? So I realized my pacing's off. Well, how do I fix that? So that was really then when we went in and added a lot of actionable tips, in each section of the report to help you use it. And that's why we're bringing editors on as we speak. We already have editors on board, but we're bringing more editors on to really, because the more minds and the more interaction and the more people using the report and giving us feedback, letting us know what they like and don't like, that is how majority of our improvements have come about, is from authors and from users. So yeah, the community is huge.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing this, and we'll have to get back together as you have more cool features to show people.
Absolutely. We'd love to come back. We've got lots of excitement in the pipeline, so hopefully we can have cool things to share soon.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you at 20 Books, and I hope we can actually meet in person again one day if we are allowed out of our houses. So. Yeah,
I have not canceled any of my tickets or room reservations for NINC or 20 Books. If that's going to happen, I'll be there. So, but okay. That's not like it's all my decision, right? But like I'm itching to get out of the house and mingle with the authors and hang out. I really get a lot out of that personally, for just my own energy. It's been rough just being home with my family.
When is it? I think it's pretty soon, right?
September.
Oh, September. Yeah, that's a big question mark. Be interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, and it all boils down, and if there's any kind of resurgence and how it changes.
They're already making plans to put it online, I think. So
yeah,
that's probably what's going to happen.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll keep in touch.
See you guys later. Thanks for having us.
All right.